Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 140. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going? And, wow, the energy.
I am 2 energy drinks deep, and it's still early in the day, so work hasn't beaten the shit out of me.
And your heart's ready to explode. Perfect, let's go.
That's every morning. So today, we want to cover hobbying. We haven't really covered it too often on this, and it's an aspect that deserves to be brought up every once in a while. We've covered painting quite a few times, but let's have the big talk of how much does it cost to hobby in Warhammer?
Sounds good.
Now, I've asked the most loaded question, which is what we'll get into, is the various tiers. We'll use that word so that we can get a sweet thumbnail out of this. But we'll talk about the various tiers of starting in the hobby versus a more serious setup once you've done it for a while.
There absolutely are going to be the intro, the bare minimums, and then all the way up to oh, you're trying to be professional. Vastly different in the expenses, it turns out. But yeah, I mean, we're going to go through a bunch of stuff in the episode. I don't think we're going to specifically bring up, this exact tool, but we'll reference them and there's going to be links. Nothing is sponsored. We're not getting any kickbacks, any money from any of this stuff.
No, in fact, if you want to support us because you actually enjoy what we're doing here, we have a Patreon at patreon.com/SullySingleton, and we've got merch on Orchid 8 in the Poor Hammer section. We've got sweet new dice, which are selling, so if you want those, please get a hold of them before they're gone again. Restocking takes quite a while. But with all of the shilling out of the way, let's get into the actual tiers of hobbying.
All right, let's start at the Bare Necessities. So this tier is technically, this is all you need to build the model.
So a $5 X-Acto knife and $5 of super glue from your local store, wherever you get super glue.
Technically, that's all you need.
And I would say $6 of paintbrushes from Amazon or whatever. I will say this, we're ignoring the cost of paints and primers and all that on this episode because we've done painting episodes before about the paints, and we'll probably do 10 more painting episodes before we cover hobby again. So we're going to mention paintbrushes and airbrushes and all that because they are hobby tools, but we're not going to get into paint prices. That's a whole different topic.
Yeah. And the Bare Necessities, technically you would want paint and brushes and all that stuff, but you can also get super cheap stuff.
Go to Michael's.
Technically all you need is the X-Acto knife and super glue to put the model together, and it's playable now.
Yep. So that's a very boring tier to talk about, but it is technically the bare minimum. Now, going up one tier of price, we can get a very solid setup. Let's give ourselves a small $30 to $40 budget, and you're gonna see what we can get out of that.
So a primary start is getting some sprue clippers. Using an X-Acto knife to get the model off the sprue is possible. It's a pain in the ass though, super annoying. So getting some actual sprue clippers can increase your enjoyment and also make it faster. Quite a bit, and they're not that expensive, but $10.
And cleaning models, instead of using an X-Acto knife, you can get a dedicated hobby knife, which is a modeling tool type thing where you can scrape it against your finger without drawing blood. If you stab yourself with the tip, you will jam it into your finger. That's still a thing, and I've done it dozens of times.
It's not enjoyable, but it's also still not as bad as an X-Acto knife doing that same thing.
So a hobby knife is $10 to $20 depending on which. Again, you could just use an X-Acto knife for it. They're very universal tools, so having one anyway is not a bad idea. We can get $6 of Tamiya plastic cement to put stuff together instead of buying super glue, unless you're doing resin models, in which case you still need super glue.
True. If you're just doing the normal plastic models though, the plastic cement is really nice. But if you're going to go with super glue, it's also not a bad idea to look at getting some super glue activator.
Yes. So activator is a mixed thing in my mind. It's very useful as a tool. If I smell it, I want to throw up because I've had bad experiences with it.
And to be honest, originally I was that's dumb. Why would I It's glue, you just hold it and then it sets. It'll be fine. Given it's only $6 or $7, really quite nice to be able to just, put the glue, hold the model with it glued where you need to go, spray the activator, and now it's set. There's no 10 seconds, 20, no, you spray it, you're good.
Or you put super glue on one side, activator on the other, press them together.
Tricky.
That's my go-to for a really hard, narrow thing that needs super glue, like when we get prints.
Yeah.
That said, do not, under any circumstance, spray activator on super glue that is on your skin. Also, don't sit in an unventilated area for 4+ hours spraying activator constantly, because you will poison yourself, as I have done before, and you get very nauseous and very sick, and then the smell of activator will make you nauseous for the rest of your life.
Yeah. No, it's like the body's reacting and reminding you that this is a chemical that is not beneficial to your health.
Yeah, I don't recommend huffing activator.
No. I mean, it's like not a big deal to spritz it every once in a while over the course of, a couple hours. You did it 10 times. That'll dissipate in the room without any issue.
It's another when you're putting together, half of an army that you printed off all in one sitting in your brother's basement, unventilated in the corner, just huffing it.
And like every time you go to glue something, you use it instead of like, oh, on this particular one, it's going to be a pain, so I'll use it.
And this was before the days of me realizing I could put all of like the one piece on the table. The one piece is real. We could put all of the one piece on the table and spray it all with activator at once.
Yeah.
And leave it there, super glue each of my models and slap them on with the activator piece. Yeah, didn't think of that at the time, so I was just spraying it once per model over and over.
Yeah, very useful, but a couple things to keep in mind.
Yeah, just don't be an idiot.
Basically.
Pretty good life hack, really.
Yeah, so moving on.
Another thing I'd recommend is getting a cutting mat. You can get them for like $10 online. Our local game store has them as well. Really nice big ones for real cheap. A cutting mat is just a really nice working area for everything hobby related, especially if you hobby where you like have dinner and stuff and you don't want to get paint or super glue on your kitchen table and have your significant other beat you.
That seems like you're speaking from experience, potentially.
Potentially.
Allegedly, or something like that.
Allegedly.
Yeah, no, the cutting mats are, they're for cutting. And yes, that is true. But they can also just be used as like, this is the like safe hobby area that I can spill glue and shit on and it won't ruin the table.
And as a last thing, we're going to need a palette of some type. Technically, a paper plate works. You don't have to get fancy. But you can buy like a ceramic paint palette for like $5-6. Or one that Borrelia put me on to, because I think he saw it in a different hobby video someone had, is like those fidget pop circle things that you see at like checkout aisles in stores. Apparently those make kind of cool palettes because they're silicone, so nothing will stick to them, and you just wait for the paint to dry and then just pop it so that you can throw it out. I hadn't heard of this, but it's kind of neat as a different one. I've never done it though.
I hope Borrelia's got an actual image of what we're talking about, because I had no idea that this was even like a thing, and you were trying to explain to me. I was like, these words are technically words but mean nothing. So an interesting idea.
So what we covered is probably like $40-50 depending on links. However, we can also save some money and get some nice extras with things like tweezers and files and stuff, because
there are like hobby starter sets, and particularly we have a local shop, local in some heavy quotes.
It's down the road. It's 15 minutes away. It's not like it's a big deal. So we're close to a place called Michigan Toy Soldier. This is pretty famous. I'm sure Ninjon and Scott both talk about this on their channels. Michigan Toy Soldier does shipping to like the whole US. Like they've got an online store. It's nice because we're local to it, so to us it's just a local game store, but they have a hobby starter set box that I always see on the counter there, and in it is a pair of clippers, 2 different types of tweezers, an X-Acto knife, file, and which is more for metal models. Don't use like a full file on plastic models. You will shred plastic with it. And some sanding sticks. And it's pretty cool for a bunch of no-name stuff that like you don't really care about brand name on any of this anyway. And it's like $15 on their website. I don't know what it is in store. Probably about the same.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's a really nice way to get a quick starter set, and it's really cheap for all the stuff you're getting inside of it. So those exist as well, depending on your location on Earth. We'll say if you're in the US, you could definitely do this as a starting point for like $15. $15. Then add on things like your cements and your pallets and a cutting mat or whatever after that.
Yeah, it's honestly a great start. One thing is like for tweezers, it's nice to have tweezers. The ones that are like curved and bent and have a spring are super nice comparatively to just like a straight tweezer. Like those are still useful, but
the ones that are the normally closed,
yeah,
where you put pressure on them to open them so you can leave them closed without having pressure on your fingers, they're really nice. But that won't be what's in the starter set, but those are amazing if you end up buying a set.
And could be the kind of thing that like you upgrade into for the future.
So we'll call that the like generic starting point. This is probably where you start. I expect most people who are into the Warhammer hobby or into whatever minigame hobby can check this list off and go, yep, I've got all of these things.
Yeah, I think potentially like the files and sanding sticks and stuff like that might be a bit niche if you didn't get like this actual hobby starter set. But in general, yeah, this is a great starting point.
Now we can get into the more serious setup. The probably not your first purchases, but you end up getting them.
These are the kind of things that as you're hobbying, you get annoyed with a particular aspect of it. And it's like, this could be done better. I'm able to accomplish my goal, but it could be easier.
Yes, you're problem solvers. So these are things that are by no means required, but are definitely upgrades to your toolkit. So these are things like having a wet palette versus just having a generic well palette or piece of paper or whatever. Wet palettes are like $20-$30. You can obviously build your own for super cheap, but then you're getting into now you had those supplies on hand or whatever.
Yeah.
For a dedicated wet palette from the store, $20-$30. It's not a big deal. Mine's a really nice one. It's like $35.
I'm actually interested in looking for a particular one because normal wet palettes for me have always been just like too large. I don't need all of that real estate. I don't need to store my brush in it just because of whatever. So there's apparently some smaller ones out there that Brad might have randomly sitting in his basement or something like that. So I'm going to try that out. But wet pellets are actually really nice to use.
I have been using one for a different project we'll talk about on a later episode, but I very much enjoy wet palettes for their use cases, but I also use ceramic palettes a lot. So it's not like one is strictly better than the other. It's just I've got uses for both.
Well, I mean, especially if you're going to be doing like dry brushing and stuff like that.
Yeah, you don't need a wet palette for that.
Not particularly the wet pellet optimal strategy, but it is nice to have.
Another thing would be files and sanding sticks, which they were in that starter set one, but that's kind of like a one-off. But you can get a ton of sanding sticks for like $10-$20 on Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, and like there are some that you can get like the different sizes, so you can get like a real thin one, and like some are like actually curved and stuff like that. But it's nice to have some like sanding sticks just to clean up some particular problems. And
it's a tool that I find I use very rarely, but when I use it, it's like relieving a future headache.
Yes.
Like, you know, when you need a sanding stick, when you look at a model and you see that hard to get mold line that's just, it will not go away, and you're like, I have to sanding stick this, because if I don't, I'm going to prime this, I'm going to see it still, and I'm going to be livid.
And like fixing it without a sanding stick is going to be a pain. Like, you're potentially going to do more damage to the model.
And for people who haven't ever held one, a sanding stick is like a piece of foam that like moves around, and you can wobble it and all that, but it's covered in sanding paper material, so you can use it to sand stuff that is at weird angles.
Yeah, like the needle files, the metal ones, aren't as useful even as the sanding files, just because if you use it, you need to know that it's going to take away plastic. Like, it is going to actually dig.
Yeah, you're gonna want to use a sanding stick afterwards.
Yeah.
Files are like for more serious things, like if you've got to like shave off a piece from a resin print of yours or whatever, right?
Hilariously, I was particularly glad I had some extra ones when I was putting together some of my kilocans, because those were a problem. But generally, they aren't needed.
I wish I had seen the half-built kilocans. You've ranted to me so many times after you built those.
I hate them.
And I never saw them during the process to see how absolutely screwed up they were.
Yeah.
So anyway, another thing is a painting schmuck. Any apron will do. I've got one that my wife got me for Christmas that's just like a denim one. Very nice. I think they're like between $20 and $40 on Amazon or whatever.
So you can find cheaper ones that are like plastic. Don't.
Just buy yourself a nice one if you've got to wear it.
If you've got to wear it, actually get something that's nice. And like, if you're on that much of a budget, go get like a towel or something like that. The plastic ones are not.
Tuck a napkin into your collar.
Yeah, do something like that. It's just
admit you're a child.
Yeah.
It's not the first time you've ruined a shirt with paint.
Yeah, we've also got things like green stuff, which can help fix problems in models that you can patch up or just make alterations if you really get into it.
In addition to green stuff, I will say when you're getting low on a bottle of plastic cement, chopping up spare sprue, throwing it in there and letting it melt into the cement to become sprue goo is very useful to have a bottle of sprue goo laying around as like a very liquid version of green stuff that then you use your sanding stick to file down afterwards.
Yeah, so that basically creates like a paste of the cement sprue stuff.
It's basically liquid plastic that you just apply.
Yeah, and it works well because it still flows a bit, so it can like actually like, you know, level into whatever the issue is, but because of that it doesn't like bridge gaps so much.
Yeah, it's not for true gap filling like when you get out the green stuff to make like a big piece. It's for when you've got two parts that don't quite line up and you can see that narrow gap between them that you want to fill. But they both have very good uses. The sprue goo is not something you buy. It's something that you just make as you're hobbying and you've run low on one of your plastic cement bottles and you just throw it in there. But it's just something that I like to point out for people who are looking for new tools for their toolkit.
So one of the ones that I feel like, Brad, you would want to have on like the Bare Necessities, but absolutely is not, is a pin vise.
It depends.
The amount of like hatred that you have for non-drilled out barrels is like, oh, it's not a model done.
And that's why it depends. If you have an army where you need to be doing drilled out barrels, then yes, it's a necessity. If your army doesn't actually have barrels on it for whatever reason, like you're playing Tyranids, if you're playing one of those armies, Drukhari, none of those have barrels. Pin vices are more of a nicety for when you actually want to pin something. Pin vise is also a stupid name, which we need to point out. This is a hand drill. This is a drill bit that goes into a handle that you spin by hand, and for some reason it's called a pin vise.
I mean, it is a vise that holds the bit.
I get that technically it's vicing the drill bit, but like, why is that not called a drill bit vise? Why is it a pin vise? I guess because we do pinning with it? It's a stupid name.
It is a confusing name that I also forgot for several minutes as trying to put up these show notes together. It was like that thing that you drill barrels out with. Google's not understanding that. I don't understand why it's not getting it.
If you ever buy a pin vise, they're very cheap. They come with drill bits that you throw away. They're always trash. Buy like a set of Dremel drill bits. They will be like, I think like $8-10, and those will be much better drill bits than whatever came with the vise.
Yeah, I mean, like, you don't have to. Like, those ones can technically work.
But you're going to be wrenching on stuff to get it done. Every one that has come with a pin vise has been awful compared to like just buying dedicated little drill bits.
You'll be able to put enough pressure physically on it to drill through plastic. But like, if you don't have to put that extra pressure on by actually buying a nice drill bit that is sharp and does the job, then yeah, it makes sense to go do that. Again, this is we're upgrading to make things easier tier. So upgrade to make things easier.
And while we're doing this is where I would put things like magnets. So get some like N52s. You can buy them online all over the place. The site I think we use a lot is called Magnet Baron. There's a bunch of them though.
There's tons. You can do like the disc magnets, so you can actually like magnetize the models. Also, you can get mats to magnetize the bases and attach like for storage essentially to secure the model to the base of the carrying container.
And there's a wonderful Duncan Rhodes video about this, which is how we store our models for travel all the time. We'll try to have a link to that on YouTube right now. Ta-da. Thanks, Borelio.
Yeah, nailed it. I feel like I have to bring up painting handles, but I think they're dumb and a waste of money.
So we own quite a few in our playgroup. They are not a total waste of money, but they are definitely
never used.
A pseudo waste of money. I use them, but the way I use them, any stick would have done.
Yeah, exactly.
So the way I tend to use painting handles, instead of the stupid GW, like open the clamp, put the model in, reclamp it, right? What I tend to do is I just take a comfortable painting painting handle, which I've got some GW ones I do like for holding. And then I just slap a bunch of blue tack on top, which is like the poster tack or whatever.
Yeah.
But I slap that on top and then I just push the model onto it and it will just stay there. And that's how I use them, which any fucking wood rod would do to put that on top of.
Yeah, like literally anything that you can hold nicely.
That just feels comfortable in your hand. But I do use these, especially for certain models that are a pain in the ass when I'm airbrushing them or whatever.
Yeah, something to hold the model that isn't just the model is fair. Yes, that is something that can be useful, but like going out of my way to recommend buying something like that is wild to me, especially because like they're not like $2.
And if you ever watch painting guides, people will mention painting handles, but I can't tell you the last time I saw someone use like a $20 painting handle in their painting guide, because it's not worth it. You're either going to hold the model or you're going to put it on some blue tack on a stick.
So there we go. That's the upgrade. We get some blue tack.
And sticks.
And find a stick around the house that is nice. Like...
Nothing against if you want to buy one painting handle to do the blue tack trick on. Just know that like you're buying 15 cents of plastic and the plastic forming process that was done on it. So as a last thing in this category, lighting. This is something that isn't like a bare necessity, but the second you have it, you'll never go back. Getting proper lights where you're hobbying, especially as we enter our 30s and my eyes are not what they were, even with lasers being attached to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's something to think about, like, oh, I'm trying to look at proper lighting for my painting or, you know, taking pictures or whatever. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. But having good lighting, even when you're just assembling the model, it's so nice. Like, it is not necessary. But once you have it, it feels so much easier. You're not trying to be like, oh, I'm going to squint and try and figure out where these go together and how you can see it.
Yeah, it's not necessary if I'm told to make a literal list of necessaries, but the second you use it, it is necessary. Because you just are like, I could do this with a light. Why would I ever do it without proper lighting?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously there's going to be, you know, everybody has different lighting conditions in whatever room they're using, so some is going to be better than others, but generally you're not going to have perfect lighting for modeling that's kind of small, and like you might be like hunched over to kind of look at it, so having some dedicated lighting is going to be good, and you know, some type of magnifier on it.
It can help. I think the lighting is more important than the magnifying aspect. If you just buy like a nice LED desk lamp to shine down on it is helpful much more than the magnifier. That said, our buddy bought these and we made fun of him, but I love them, is the headband magnifier thing that you put on. Like, it makes you look like a crazy old guy with the magnifying glasses over your eyes.
Yeah, the like crazy watchmaker look.
Yeah. But those things are really nice.
Yeah.
They really are. Once you use it, you're like, shit, I look like a dork. But like, damn, is this comfortable to actually do work with?
Yeah. I mean, I've also enjoyed having just like the nice magnifier with the circle light around it that I can like tune and adjust and like all that stuff. It's the light portion is more, but it's nice to have the magnifier as well.
So I think that'll cover like the small upgrades tier, the extra tools in the tool belt.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a couple things that are kind of like paint adjacent, like upgrading to some like actual nice paint brushes as opposed to like the decent ones that you're probably going to be getting.
You probably didn't buy any sable hair brushes. You probably only bought like basic $6 Amazon brushes till now. Yeah, it might be time to upgrade to have one of those in your collection and treat it well.
And then like figure out like, oh, is that actually, you know, how often are you using it? How beneficial is it? Probably buy some more if it's getting the use kind of thing.
Yeah. Then we can talk about like the other toy things too, of like a brush cleaner cup. These are actually amazing now that I've started using one, and I won't go back. Eric is not a believer yet because he hasn't used it.
I'm not a believer. I have a coffee mug with water in it and some paper towel.
A coffee mug is fine. I used to use a solo cup, but these have little nubs at the bottom of the cup. So while you swirl the paintbrush in the water, you brush the brush against the little nubs, and it cleans the last color off a brush so fast every time. It makes switching colors like instantaneous when doing hand brush work.
Yeah, I hate that like you're actually selling me on it and it feels so dumb, especially because it looks so dumb.
It does.
It looks like a toy that's like for a kindergartner.
But it functions. So I really appreciate having that. Another thing is this is where you want to start getting some brush cleaner, cleaning your brushes properly now that you have like a sable brush that you're hoping will last a long time. You'll find you can save a lot of brushes just by giving them a proper cleaning and actually like following instructions.
Generally, we have like some shitty epoxy kind of brushes for things that are like, this is going to destroy the brush, like applying basing material and stuff like that. That it's like, it could probably be saved if we spent the time to wash it and clean it properly, or I could have this 25-cent piece of shit brush do it and then throw it away.
And I also just recommend go on Amazon and buy those epoxy brushes.
Yeah.
You can buy them by the 100.
They're just nice to have.
They're the best way to do basing material. Fuck the scalpel thing that you're like scraping on there with the metal thing. No. You get brushes that are designed to be used once. You use these things and you can just slap it on, get perfect brush control putting basing material on. Use your brush cleaner cup and it will completely clean off the basing material. Well, mostly. Again, this brush is going to die.
Yeah.
It will mostly clean it off. You can do it again and again and again. And I can get a whole army base so quick now compared to when I was fucking around with those metal scrapey tools trying to like sculpt my basing material with a metal stick. This is so much better. And just when you're done, yes, the brush will be irrevocably damaged. Just throw it out. But that was the point of that brush. It is pennies.
Yeah. And like those are nice to have so that you can use those like throwaway brushes when things are going to be problematic and save your nice, expensive brushes and actually use cleaner on them and keep them for many years at a time kind of thing. So yeah, look at getting some actual brush cleaner. It is pretty cheap and it lasts forever basically. Like,
yeah, just making sure you have your different types of brushes, have your dry brushes. They don't cost much more than normal brushes. You can get them on Amazon.
I guess, like, do we bring up airbrushes now?
We'll do that in the bigger items. As much as we consider them very core, they are a bigger purchase.
It is kind of the next tier.
Yeah, I consider it one of the first early purchases you do, but it's a big purchase. So we'll call this the end of the getting serious tier, whatever we end up calling it. This is your increasing your tools. Now we're getting into the going above and beyond your big item tier. This is where you get big things like your airbrush, or you start splurging on nice toys, like getting something like a God Hand or the equivalents from other companies.
This would be like the, I forget which version you have, but you've got the like, so there's the pin vise that you push and twist by hand, but there's an automatic version.
Okay, so above and beyond tier. The first thing I'm going to recommend is getting a proper airbrush setup.
Yeah.
They're really not that expensive. We've done a whole episode about airbrushing. We don't make a dime off you watching it, but go watch it anyway. The more people I convert to airbrushing, the better. Your life will be improved. The airbrush, we covered in detail there, but the long and short of it is get a decent compressor, get at least a mediocre airbrush, and if you're really concerned about it, you can get a vent thing, but I really don't think it's that required unless you get into doing crazier stuff than basic acrylic paint.
It all depends on your situation. Obviously, if you have little children, a little bit more safety is probably a good idea.
Don't coddle the children. Get them that black lung.
Yeah, in general, acrylics aren't too bad, so you should be okay.
So ignoring all of the items that go with the airbrush, like we could riddle them all off again, but it's like all of that, your cleaner, your thinner, getting a pot just to hold your airbrush, because honestly, it's very comfortable. The nice little add-ons for it. We've covered them before. Whole video about it. You should really get an airbrush if you don't have one yet. But for the rest of this, we're going to get into the toy stuff. My first one, as Eric was mentioning, is that auto hand drill.
It's so dumb, but it's not ridiculous when you're trying to do a whole army at the same time. Like, your hand will cramp on a normal pin vise. It absolutely will.
So mine is a WoW stick, which I got because Vince Venturella advertised it for me, and I listened to that man.
That sounds right. I just remember it having like a dumb name that was like a WoW stick. You don't say.
A WoW stick sounds like a personal item
Yeah.
for ladies to have an enjoyable evening.
Yes, it does.
But anyway, the WoW stick is a auto pin vise, auto drill, whatever. I really like having it because you just put your drill bit in it, you press the button on the side and it just starts spinning and it will just burst right through a piece of plastic. But it's so comfortable if you have to pin a bunch of feet or if you have to drill out a bunch of gun barrels.
And like, it's also not a full-sized hand drill. Like, you could technically get drill bits that are small enough in a normal, like, handheld, full Home Depot kind of drill. That's gonna be miserable, though. You're gonna drill through the entire fucking model.
Yeah, so I really like having this thing. They're like $55 or whatever. There's a bunch of different brands. You don't have to buy the exact same brand. They're a wonderful tool if you have to do a whole army of Space Marines up next. Would buy.
Would buy, yeah.
Another one is the God Hand. So Eric got me this for my birthday.
It feels really excessive.
It does. How much was it? It was like
50 or 60 or something like that. It's gone down a little bit because I think they came out with another one that's like the super special version that isn't any different.
And then there's the ones from other companies. The God Hand is just the brand name one. That it's a very high-end pair of clippers. And you look at them and you're like, that's a pair of clippers. You're going to pay 5 times more than my generic clippers that I use.
And like, the generic clippers do a pretty decent job.
They absolutely do. These ones, I haven't like fully broken them in for like a whole army, but I used them to build like 10 models. They're a dream.
Yeah.
Zero resistance, perfect cuts. They really are good. I don't like believing in the stupid pay a bunch of money for something I could have got for cheap. Worth every penny. Highly recommend. If people are bothering you for your Christmas wish list or your birthday wish list, Eric, and you can't figure out items for it, this episode, you should be paying attention to things to ask for.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like actually a holiday gift episode, but like, you know, keep an eye on it because we brought up a bunch of things that are from like the bare necessities to like, oh, this could be nice. This is an upgrade.
Yeah, I highly recommend everything we've mentioned in this tier, even though like I know they're toys, but since I hobby like basically weekly at this point, I use them a lot. I really like them. This is also where we'll say like if you haven't put them in your collection yet, things like oils, enamels, dry pigments for basing. All of those I would put here as like, technically we get into, are they just paints and I shouldn't be including them at all?
We're not bringing up paints, but like, these are not acrylics.
I banned them from the acrylic paint episode because they're not that either. So we should at least mention them here and they'll get a dedicated episode later.
And at the same time, like some of them do require a decent amount more effort, and specifically a decent amount more effort to do safely.
Yeah, once you use a brush for oils or enamels, you don't go back to using it for other things. It's dedicated for that purpose now.
It's not like you can't get away with just using acrylics for these things. It's just...
Look, oils are better.
It's just the next part.
Null oil's good when you're new because it's right there and it's easy and it takes no effort.
Yeah.
The second you use a real oil wash and you see how easy it was, even if it is too scary for your very first model, you will never go back to using an acrylic wash. That's without getting into like properly using them for painting like highlight dots and then dry brushing them out to make the smoothest highlight you've ever seen on a shoulder pad. Oh, so good.
Yes, they definitely open up additional options in painting, and I mean, once you know how to use them, they can be easier, but like, it does feel like the next beyond the normal.
They're a spooky upgrade when you're very new,
yeah.
But the second you start using them, you never go back. They're just too good of tools to ignore.
One of the other things is actually getting like a real Dremel.
Which is Dremel like Kleenex? Is that actually a company name?
I'm pretty sure it is a company name, but I don't know if it's
also the name of the tool. It's like Kleenex.
Yeah, like it is a company name because that's where you buy it, but I don't know what it's a Dremel.
Okay.
Dude, I don't know. Yeah, it's a rotary tool, apparently.
It's a Dremel.
It's a Dremel. Yeah, I mean, they're just useful tool to have access to in like adulting life.
Mine has been used for many more things than Warhammer, but it has been brought out for Warhammer stuff, especially getting into like terrain crafting.
Really, like kit bashing is like, okay, this is a nice tool to have because you can actually get in there and not have to just hack stuff apart with an X-Acto knife.
And for a final item, I'd say one last thing is getting some nice storage for all of your stuff so it's not sitting out in piles, making your wife mad that it's been sitting on the kitchen table for a year.
Allegedly.
No comment. Love you, babe.
I definitely haven't seen the same models that were there in like 4 years ago.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, right. Silent King isn't a thing.
We're not talking about that bastard right now.
Yeah, but having storage, I mean, one, having place to like put your finished models is nice, but having storage that you can like move it around, even if it's in the process of being assembled or painted or whatever, that's actually really convenient.
So, for the final tier here that we have covered, I think it needs a name. So, if you were to buy all of this and everything below it, we will name this the I'm sorry, Borrelio, that I made you edit a 6-hour-long AOS Hot Takes episode, and I will ship you this to Brazil.
That's a pretty good name.
It's a pretty good name. So, there you go. We actually delayed recording this episode, so Borrelio's had all of this for a while, so he can send bunches of pictures.
Yeah, I was like, I hope he's sending pictures and like actually using them.
But yeah, so this episode came about from us realizing we owed Borrelio for the mental damage he suffered editing over 14 hours of raw footage.
Yeah, with a pretty tight deadline.
So yeah, that's the final tier here. Accent with paints as you so wish. We've got a whole episode about favorite paints. I would add a bunch of AKs to that now too. They're not my all-time favorite paint range, but they are up there.
And if you have any other, like, this is the hobby tool that you didn't talk about that I love and you need to have, let us know.
Especially toy ones that people can ask for Christmas. Get those in the comments because, like, I guarantee you half of our audience is groaning at the thoughts of telling people what they want for Christmas.
And speaking of Christmas ideas, we've also got merch.
True. Podcaster merch. It's a requirement in the Beyond tier. You gotta get it.
Yeah.
It's very needed. Get yourself some Pour Hammer dice, toilet dice. Get yourself a nice mug that says Gone Fishing. You deserve it.
You can use it to paint instead of that weird thing.
Or you can use a proper brush cleaning cup, and then you can drink from your mug and feel smug as fuck.
Fair enough.
But with all of that done, please do the YouTube pleasantries on your way out. Enjoy yourselves. That's it for us this week.
Sounds good.